Hello and welcome to the X Factor podcast. I'm your host, Charles Epstein. Today's guest, Matt Burns, has led multiple lives. He's been an HR executive leading major change and situation transformation initiatives, a strategy consultant and industry analyst, a serial entrepreneur, as well as a podcast host and producer. He currently hosts and produces the Thinking Inside the Box podcast. He is also a co-founder of Atlas Copilot, whose mission is to transform the way HR professionals, teams, and other people, leaders, do their work, and increases the value they can offer by empowering them with the latest in generative AI technology. Matt, welcome.
I'm looking forward to this conversation. Thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah, no, thanks so much for taking the time. I know you've got a lot of things swirling around Atlas Copilot. Some of those things you shared with me in confidence. Your secret stays with me until, of course, it's unveiled for the eagerly awaiting public. Where are we having this conversation? Where are you based right now? I know you've been based for a little bit of a while in London. Where are we having this conversation?
I'm in beautiful Montreal, Canada today. Very,
very, very nice. And where's HQ for the most part? I know you've been in London, for the past year or so?
HQ is my laptop. I'm more or less nomadic. I'm Canadian. I have a Canadian passport, but we live in a world now where borders are really just constructs that we create where it's necessary. And I lead a tech company and find opportunities to be in New York and London and Montreal, predominantly those three cities where I'm orienting myself. Our Atlas is based in Greenwich, which is just east of the city of London. So we have, in that sense, an operation there. We have a TV studio in that business. So I'm out there 4+ months a year. And then when the weather gets too cold, I try and find a place to go where it's a bit warmer when I can. Time off's been hard to get, so I just try and find somewhere warmer to put my laptop.
Right. I mentioned in your intro, you're a man who has led many lives. So we're going to go through several of them, culminating, of course, in what you're doing now, which is very exciting with Atlas Copilot and generative AI. So going back a little bit, if I may, you were with Walmart for 6 years. And for 1 year, from 2014 to 2015, you were director of change management. If there's one through line connecting everything we want to cover on this pod and with the AI community, it's adapting to change. So 2 questions relate to this. You think that a large organization like Walmart would be hard to change other than perhaps at the margins. What were you able to accomplish during your 1 year as director of change management?
I was really lucky. I worked with some really, really good people. I fully appreciate the perception that some people have of that organization for a number of reasons. And at the time that I worked there, it was the world's largest organization. And that came with some understandings that it attracted really talented people. And Walmart is and was at the time I was there an organization that really focused on 2 things. Performance is really important, but also how you did things was also very important. And that sometimes is lost in organizations. And you may not agree with the politics of the family and things of that nature, and that's a different conversation. But I can tell you that when I worked there for 6 years, I always felt that my values were aligned with the organization in the Canadian operation and how we treated people. And therefore, change was something that was just deeply embedded in the organizational culture and way of working. Change was a constant. In retail, it's about instant gratification. It's short change cycles. It's, very, 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 whether it's even just the hiring of seasonal staff to the seasonality of merchandise, it's constantly changing in retail. And the challenge with retail compared to for example, pharma, for example, I have friends who've been in pharma for 15, 20 years. It's a different problem. With retail, you're trying to solve problems at scale with limited resources. So at Walmart, I had in Canada a $22 billion business, 90,000 employees, and it was 6% of the company's portfolio. So do the math in your head on that. Wow. Now, on top of the 90,000 that I was supporting, the company in retail, generally speaking, retailers have, call it 100% turnover. Maybe it's 200% in some retail businesses. That means we're hiring close to 200,000 people a year in this business just to sustain the operation. Doesn't account for growth, doesn't account for expansions, doesn't account for format changes, doesn't account for moving into e-commerce. So as organizations get more complex, you're also working from a base of we need to have 200,000 people moving through some form of system from attraction to acquisition to onboarding to speed to productivity is critical when you're bringing in 200,000 new people into the organization every single year. With pharma, it's more of an individualized challenge. It's succession planning, but at the individual level. It's talent management at the department level. So it's different challenges, but for me, my bias for change has always been I've worked for a lot of large American based multinational companies with massive global reaches. I love the complexity of trying to wrap my head around how do I administer a survey for 2 million people? That's a fun problem to solve for. And I have tried running startups, and I guess my confession is I'm not a very good startup founder. I'm actually a really good corporate executive in big companies. So as our company gets larger, I actually find myself getting more comfortable, which is the opposite experience of most entrepreneurs who get intimidated by companies scaling and going through various stages of growth. I'm like, I can't wait to get to 100 employees. I can't wait to get to 500 employees. I'm so excited. I know that roadmap. The one from 0 to 10 and 10 to 50, those are things I've had to learn along the way.
I see. Well, I refer to you as a serial entrepreneur because you have started some other companies. Do you find that that's been a major adjustment, just that entrepreneurial mindset, which is not just a matter of risk, it's a matter of being agile. It's a matter of, hey, I know I'm not going to have 100% support. I know I have to go with a minimal viable product, and I just have to fly by the seat of my pants. Has that been a rough adjustment?
It has, and for a reason you might not expect. So that transition you're talking about, I went through in 2017 to 2020. When I left my corporate world behind, where I was very, very good at running meetings, but not much else. Because when you're a VP or a CHRO, you're running meetings all day long. You're working with teams, you're managing sprints, you're managing strategic priorities and politics and making partnerships. You're in meetings 40, 50, 60 hours a week. And then when you're doing emails in between, it's to arrange a meeting or follow up on a meeting. That was my life for the last 5+ years as a corporate employee, even though I held titles like CHRO or chief of staff or things like that. That was a hard transition because, to your point, I went from having a whole bunch of people to delegate work to and air traffic controlling and kind of supporting and program managing that work to now being one of one and realizing I have to do it all myself. And I don't really have the skills necessary to do all the technical things necessary to be a consultant or to run a business. So I had to go through a process of learning how to manage my books, how to develop a marketing campaign and a sales campaign. And some things came easier than others. Some things I was naturally good at because of my HR skills, which were translatable. And some I just had to outsource because I couldn't make it work. And some I had to just suck it up and do the hard learning of like watching YouTube videos and reading Google articles and just pounding my way through the kind of really mundane administrivia to learn this, because I've always had the belief that to lead something, you have to be able to do something. So I wanted to teach myself every part of the business at least once, so that I was able to speak from a place of knowledge and not from theory. The change that I would think would surprise you is that I have had to completely change my mind now a third time, and it's been completely unexpected. So I went into this venture having launched several before this and making lots of mistakes, but going, okay, I know how to lead agile teams. I can get a company from 0 to 20. I'm feeling pretty good about that. I have a good sense of how to run that. We're now running an AI company now. And with an AI company, it comes with completely different opportunities and completely different challenges. I won't be able to show you today because I don't have it anywhere other than in my brain. But when I show you the org chart of what we have built at Atlas Copilot, it's going to look a lot like a planetary system and a lot less like a triangle or a line, because we're now building an ecosystem where bots and humans cohabitate and they interact and they're symbiotic. I don't mean we have robots, but I mean that most people on my team are going to have multiple GPTs that work with them to help them do certain parts of their job. Maybe it's research, maybe it's sales prospecting, maybe it's marketing copywriting, but they're going to have the benefits of artificial intelligence in very defined use cases, but specific to the role. And then those use cases need to interact with the broader ecosystem of the organization, and then they need to interact with one another. So the issue I used to run into in corporate world, whether I was a executive or as a consultant, was I spent a lot of time breaking down silos. I now have the opportunity here to build almost a meshwork of connectivity tissues, which wouldn't have existed without AI, and to do so thoughtfully, and to be able to take thinking that was very, what got us here won't get us there. I now have a chance to rethink it and remap it with intentionality, and it doesn't look the same way that it once does. And I hadn't hypothesized that, and it's taking time from my limited schedule that I wasn't planning to spend doing org design. But now I'm going, if I don't get this right, I'm missing a big opportunity here, not just to be more productive, but to think about how work can be different. Because if we let AI go by and it just becomes a tool for more efficiency and through an exploitative model, I think we've missed a huge opportunity. And I'm trying to not do that myself, knowing that I'm working with companies that are expecting us to deliver innovation. Right. I need to think innovatively to do that.
Sure.
And I've been lucky. We've had some customers who bought into what we're doing. I can't share all the companies on this because of NDAs, but one of them is one of the world's largest streaming services. And they have a very unique and innovative view around employee culture and have been known for that in the industry for quite some time. And they're asking us to help advise them on how AI can transform that and reshape that for a world that includes AI. And that's a big responsibility. So it's not fair for me to say, well, I'm just doing things the way I did it before and I'm wrapping in AI. Right. They want to think about things differently, and therefore we need to operate differently.
Right. And so like the old marketing maxim, you want to eat your own dog food. So you're grappling with many of the same issues that many of your clients are grappling with. How do you deal, we refer to the world of AI augmented work. How do you work with it in an organic way? So it's kind of interesting because every organization is offering so-called AI solutions is still, working through their own way of embracing and incorporating this technology. Again, want to come back to Atlas because you guys are doing some real fascinating work there. As CHRO with JYSK, you developed the organization's first digital human resources transformation. What did that entail? What made it a success? And with the benefit of hindsight, would you have done anything differently?
Yeah, that was a really cool chapter of my professional career. And I'm really, again, grateful for the people that I worked with. At the time I left Walmart, I really wanted to round out what was largely professional experiences with some educational experiences. Because of the circumstances in my family coming out of high school, I wasn't able to go to university. I had to go to the workplace, and I went into retail and took a job in management, which paid me a salary and allowed me to contribute to my household, which at the time was really, really important. I had success early because I was willing to work and I had something really powerful to work for. And organizations looked past the fact that I didn't have a 4-year university degree or wasn't credentialed and said, you have the right attitude or the right commitment or the right way of, thinking about things. So we'll take a chance on you. And I was very lucky people took chances on me a lot throughout my career or mentored me and kind of softened those rougher edges that just would have come if I had taken a more traditional path. But the path I took was I have to start working. And at this point in my career, having went through the Walmart experience, I restructured all of operations for Walmart Canada. So their operating model I redesigned, and then I redesigned HR, sitting within HR. And my coach at the time, who was the CHRO of the company, and later on to be the chief operating officer of the company, we had a really candid conversation where he said, Matt, you're doing a great job, but I've seen people who do really great jobs in this line of work. And if they don't stop at some point, it can eat you alive because it is an all-in type experience. It's high pressure. It's high stakes. You're thinking about things like media. You're thinking about things like labor activity. You're thinking about things like communications leaks, because when we're planning restructurings, people's livelihoods are at risk and you need to handle that with the utmost care. But then when you're talking about people's livelihoods at risk, it also creates a whole bunch of stakeholder management and internal machinations that have to exist for that activity to continue, but to do so in a way that is both respectful to the individual, but also in the interest of the broader business. It's not an easy thing for people to manage, and most people wouldn't want to and shouldn't get involved in that kind of activity. But I have always had an aptitude for that kind of work. I've always wanted to put myself in between the tough spot and the organization and try and play that role. I don't know what that is, but it's just something I am naturally drawn to. And my coach rightfully said, Matt, you will burn yourself out. You will develop a systemic health problem, or you will develop a crutch that will become a systemic health problem if you don't change, because this job is just not meant for someone to do full time. It's meant to do for a few years, get your experiences, and then take a bit of a break. And he said, maybe this is the time for you to do that. And I resisted at first, but then I eventually agreed that doing an MBA is what I wanted. So I took an executive MBA program, and rather than do it at Walmart where I knew I'd have to spend 80 hours a week working, which I was fine with, but I really wanted to invest in my education for the first time and see if I actually was as smart as I thought that I was. maybe I'm not that smart. Maybe I shouldn't be the person going to university. Maybe I am the person who should stay in retail and do the retail jobs, and I'm just good in this space, but I don't really have much to offer to the broader world. But when I got to the MBA program and I looked around and went, okay, no, I feel good about where my experience has taken me relative to those who had a more traditional career path. I was with students from Brazil, Mexico, the United States, and Canada. We rotated through the 4 countries and did programs in each of those countries that really gave us a really great experience. I didn't pick up much academically because I'd spent almost 20 years in the corporate world running companies and doing things. So I didn't learn a lot in the BCom sense of the word, but I had some incredible experiences which changed my perspective on life. And I met some incredible people, and that for me makes it worth that experience. But to answer your question around Walmart and change and then also Yisk and what we did, they were great about saying, Matt, we don't know what we don't know. And if you can make a compelling business case, we'll let you design what you want. And that is something you don't get the opportunity to do very often when you're in HR. Usually the CEO or the board has a strong opinion. There's already somebody in place. There's a mandate you're maintaining, and you might be tweaking on the edges, but you're not really doing lots of transformation. That does not interest me. What interests me is transformation. So when they said you could have the keys to the castle and do whatever you want, you could build an ROI, I'd spent 6 years at Walmart building business cases for everything. I'm very good at building business cases. So I built a really compelling business case. And it was predicated on the idea of digitizing the entire function end to end. But I also knew that I didn't have much of a budget to work from. So I took a different approach. At the time, most HR executives, and it's come back around again, but at the time, it was very common to buy enterprise. So you work with a single vendor and you buy all of your HR modules under a single vendor. It's a single invoice. There's the benefits of scale, and you get the systems that are in parallel. Except that at that time, it wasn't really true. Even at big companies, those systems didn't really talk that well. And having a single invoice was only important to my AP staff. It frustrated my HR staff because the modules were unevenly developed. Because when you're a technology company, I can say this now with a good degree of confidence, when you're a technology company, you can't be all things to all people. You have to pick and choose. So if you're a payroll company and you've bolted on an HRIS and an LMS and an ATS, I promise you those last 3 modules are not as good as your payroll module. And it'll never be as good as your payroll module because that's what your core business has been, and you're bolting on additional features.
Yes.
And for me, I didn't want to spend market rates for technologies that were below what I needed them to do because I had a very big mandate. I had to digitize an HR function, do so within about 15 months because behind me was coming an ERP implementation and everything was going to shut down internally around change. IT was going to be totally tied up. Dollars were going to be tied up. And more importantly, the attention of the company was going to be tied up. I had a window to build my engine so that I could run this department into the future, and it needed technology. So what we did instead was say, let's go best of breed. Let's find 5 different vendors that the best ATS platform in the market for our business size, the best LMS business we can find, the best HR system we can find. And let's find those and let's hire our own solutions architect and then integrate them ourselves on the back end with engineers and build our own enterprise solution at a fraction of the cost in a fraction of the time. So we did just that and brought 5 technologies in 12 months, procured them, implemented, integrated them, tied them together, and built our own enterprise ecosystem. It wasn't perfect, but it cost me a third of the price, and I was able to do it all in 12 months. And I beat the ERP implementation, and that built the foundation of process reengineering, data analytics, organizational network analysis, which would not have been possible without the technology layer underpinning it. And that experience was really, really instructive for me in a bunch of reasons. Yes, the technology was really, really cool, but I learned a lot about change management in that experience. We put the organization through a lot of change really, really quickly. And if you asked what I learned most about this is that I learned that HR should never be at the head of the organization leading innovation. As painful as it is for me to say that, being a CHRO who's super innovative, I was too far ahead of the rest of the organization, and it created friction because HR was leading in terms of innovation and change, and everyone else felt like HR was leading them by the nose. Even though we didn't intend for it to be like that, and even though we didn't message it like that, and that wasn't how it was intended, the perception of HR in most organizations is that of a compliance function. Right. They're a cost center, but I've always viewed HR as a profit center, and I've acted like a profit center. I've actually believed HR and marketing should be blended, so I act more like a CMO than I do a CHRO. And that created friction within my leadership, like peers who saw me as, why is Matt so far ahead? He has too much money to budget to spend. He's got too many resources. But what they weren't realizing was I was thinking differently and therefore accomplishing more. But in their mind, it was, well, why is it, why is it, why are we so, why is it so, why are we on two different pages? And at a certain point, it got to a
Right.
place, Charles, where in every management team meeting, we would do a vote and I'd be the one person saying something different and everyone else was saying the same thing. And I went, okay, at a certain point, this is not fair to either party. We need to rethink this. So if I could do it over again, I would have taken more care to bring my other C-suite colleagues along the journey with me. I tried, but I didn't try hard enough. I should have done a better job of taking the CFO and the CTO and the CEO on the journey with me because we got too far ahead and then we became part of the problem, not part of the solution.
Yeah, I want to come back to that as we get into your Atlas Copilot experience and AI more generally. I want to come back to that and bring an AI element into it as far as HR working with other functional leaders in the organization, if this actually does change things. Again, which brings us to Atlas Copilot. Give our listeners an idea of what Atlas is about, how you came to co-found it, what need in the marketplace, perhaps among HR folk it addresses.
This is the tool I always wanted as an HR professional because I was never a deep technical expert in HR. I was never the guy that you went to quote the collective agreement or the Employment Standards Act, but I was always the person you wanted to be the interface of tough information or to move change forward. I was a great HR business partner, but I was never a great HR technical resource. I was never a comp person. I was never a data analyst. I was never a recruiter. And I value all those professions, but my gift is as a generalist. I'm a conduit. So for me, Atlas Copilot is the perfect tool for a world that's getting less specialized and more generalized, because AI facilitates the flow of knowledge and the aggregation of knowledge in a way that just wasn't possible before. So what we started from, and this happened very quickly, because in the world of AI, everything happens very quickly. Last August, I came together with 3 other co-founders in London, England. 2 of them are friends that I developed over the last 7 years, working with them in a context of just, they run a media production company. They do digital events. I was on their podcast. I'd MC some of their events. They were 2 Brits that played hockey and I was a Canadian, and we became very fast friends. It was a great relationship, and it remains a great relationship to this day because they're just good men doing really good work, and they really care about making organizations better. And the way that they do that is bringing together HR leaders into forums for conversation and discussion. And they were lucky that they found people like Oracle and Workday and Visier that would sponsor that content because they wanted access to that audience. And it was high quality content, high quality conversations. And these guys were smart enough to know, hey, we've run a really successful media production company from scratch, but that's not going to be sustainable in a world that includes AI. We need to think about making a platform play. We need to think about taking what we have and doing something with it that can elongate its business cycle. But they also knew that they needed more than just that vision. They needed people that actually had worked in large organizations that could help transform the way the company would need to run. Because running a media company is not the same as running a software company. The cadence is different. The activities are different. The structure is different. And they, again, with enough self-awareness, said, we need to bring in people that we trust, but that can bridge us between where we are and where we need to go. So they brought myself in as the company's CEO, and my co-founder, Guillermo Miranda, is the former chief learning officer at IBM and Boeing, and also formerly a CHRO. So the 2 of us have spent close to 50 years in a large enterprise and also in the technology business. So we understand how it needs to look. We know what good looks like, but we need to, of course, take Atlas from 5 people, which is where we started. We're now at 30. We've done that over the course of the last 7 weeks. We're going to double again probably the next 7 weeks. So we are a startup in the traditional sense, but we're moving very, very quickly because of the market. And we started from a place of, we need to build a Netflix of HR. We need to aggregate content. We need to bring content together to make it more easy to digest and to search. But we quickly realized that we needed much more than that. And we need to actually expand the value chain to include more when it came to the platform. So what we ended up was on May 13th, we launched Atlas Copilot with 2 different options. As a B2C customer, you can buy an individual license and you can sign up for $500 a year and have access to essentially HR's ChatGPT, but it is better in a few different ways, which I can certainly get into if you're interested. Also, we sell predominantly into enterprise accounts. And we have now 10 large enterprise clients we're working with all over the world with global operations, helping them develop use cases, embedding technology and AI into their systems and using Atlas, and then helping them determine the consequences of that ingestion and how it needs to transform the way that they work. It's a bit of advisory, a very small bit of consulting, but predominantly it's a SaaS business that's pushing change inside of organizations by causing them to think about how do they work differently. Now, Atlas is different for a few reasons. So I'm sure most people who are listening have used ChatGPT at least once. We kept the interface the same because the chat-based part of ChatGPT is brilliant. The simplicity of being able to interact with I ask a question, I get an answer. Most people are used to texting and instant messaging, so it's a very easy habit to adopt. What is different about us, though, is that unlike ChatGPT, which was solving a different problem, we're solving the problem of how do we get the right information in the hands of people leaders. They're solving for how do we bring all the world's information together under a single umbrella. Right. So we've niched down and said, what are 10,000 plus curated content sets from the world's leading thought leaders around leadership, coaching, HR, and business? And how do we use that to train a large language model that can be more context rich for HR people so they don't get generic answers like you do on ChatGPT, so you don't get hallucinations, so you don't know so you don't have trust in the sources that you can provide, but you have confidence in your sources, that you have confidence in the context, that you have confidence in the application of it. And then when you layer on top of things like being able to ingest your own company's policies and procedures, job descriptions, communication, now you get a whole different layer and filter of tone, alignment that can be pre-populated. We use the term bias a lot in our company, and it's mostly in a positive context. If you have a strong bias in your company for being helpful to one another, you want that to permeate through every part of your organization. And we can guarantee that because with AI, you can overlay that value into every activity that you do, and it will have an effect, even if the employee themselves isn't triggered to do that. And as a founder, one thing I'm realizing very quickly is that there's a big challenge in terms of disseminating what's in my brain to the people in the organization on an ongoing basis at the rate of change that we have. You can do that through communication synchronously and asynchronously, but another safeguard in terms of having layers and having context be introduced into day-to-day activities that involve HR are really, really important when people are asking questions about how do I have tough conversations? How do I create a policy for this? How do I build a talent strategy for a new business unit we're developing? Those are all use cases that are coming up, but those are use cases that we're able to apply attentionality to. And the impact to the user is they get an answer that's a lot better than ChatGPT, which saves them time, gives them confidence, and ultimately creates a standard in their business, which is replicable, which is a better experience for everybody in that organization.
Right. No, it makes perfect sense. So I'm assuming that your counterparts in these conversations are a lot of HR folks. I'm sure you're talking with senior leaders across the board. But in speaking with HR folks, what are some of the misconceptions that the CHROs you're speaking with have around AI? And if you could, how would you characterize the response in just broad terms? Is it genuine excitement, looking at the upside and the opportunities? Is it a lot of trepidation, a concern about the unknown?
Great questions. On the latter question, it's a mixed bag. We had companies the moment we launched that were watching from our wait list who messaged us in the first 15 minutes when we pushed the button to go that wanted to have a demo to have a product. So they were like, we've been looking for this. If you're real, here's the check. So we had some companies that were very, 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 very interested. Now, I wouldn't say that was the majority, but I would tell you that we did a decent job going into the launch of bringing people along that journey. And those that kind of bought into that were more incentivized to take the leap, as it were. We also speak with people that have varying concerns, or to your other point, misconceptions. One misconception I hear a lot is, well, I already have AI in my company. I'm using Copilot. I'm using Galileo. My HCM technology just introduced an AI layer to it. So why would I need another solution? And the answer is because every solution is going to be an AI solution in the future, and AI will perform different activities. So Microsoft Copilot's a great example. Microsoft, great company, doing great things. They own OpenAI. But Copilot at this stage of the game is about ingesting and accessing and generating information from the Office 365 suite. Excel, PowerPoint, Word, Outlook, which is super compelling and will help people write emails, book meetings, all sorts of fun stuff. It doesn't pull from an external knowledge corpus. It doesn't benchmark. It doesn't provide regulatory information. It doesn't provide learning pathways. It doesn't provide live stream functionality to host synchronous meetings. It's solving a different problem, but it's solving it with AI. HCM technologies. I had the privilege of working with a number of organizations in the past year and helping them think through their AI strategies. All of the HCM technologies that I speak with are wrapping their existing solutions in an AI layer, which again is similarly going to provide insights to your payroll information and your HR data and perhaps even your SharePoint information. Doesn't pull from external information, doesn't talk to other systems, doesn't benchmark, doesn't give you the information and flow of the work. It's going to make search easier. It's going to make document creation easier. There's so much more you can do with AI. So we're doing all that. But now I'm thinking about individualized learning pathways. How do I take that Netflix model and rethink it and say, if you've been consuming content in the area of AI, maybe we should suggest more videos to you so you can broaden your knowledge. And you know what? Let's attribute some SHRM credits to it so you can get a digital badge for having spent your time doing this on the platform. Let's be thoughtful. Let's say, how do we take the research and the document and the content creation and turn it into a document and integrate it with your ServiceNow and file it on the person's file? So we remove all the administration from the value chain. This is my HR operations hat coming on. How do we remove the unnecessary work in the value chain so we can redeploy people towards relationships and stop having them do manual administration that nobody wants to do? We're not as good at as computers. It's not high value work. It's not what's getting people up in the morning to be excited about their jobs. Give it to AI, put parameters around it, teach it, train it, audit it, all the things. But let's not be stubborn about the fact that we need to change the way that we work. And this is almost as much advice for me as everybody else. I've even found myself, Charles, in the last few weeks being like, I really like the way that I do this though. And I don't really want to change it, but I'm literally sitting on the most powerful HR tool in AI on the planet. It's silly that we're not, like, for example, transcribing our meetings and using it to write social media posts.
Yeah. Let me ask you, when people say, well, we're developing our AI strategy, we don't have an AI strategy just yet. If you could, how would you boil AI strategy down to the 3 or 4 or even 5? Let's keep it to 3 for purposes of brevity. The 3 cornerstones of AI strategy. What should those be?
What a good question. Let me, and I haven't thought this through, so give me a second to kind of wrap my head around it. But here's what I would say. I'm looking at this journey that we're on as the largest transformational project of my life. This is not a lot different than a large technology adoption project in a big company. I've had to make millions of people change their behavior or interact with technology differently as a consequence of the strategies that I've deployed. So for me, that isn't a daunting thought. What's daunting is I'm closer to this than I was in those organizations, so I have a bit more of influence over the result. But when it comes to how I think about this, it's a really simple model. It's circle. What's your current state? Where are we at today? What are the biggest pains in the organization? What are the biggest points of friction? Where are the biggest points of under leverage that we can look at? Do we have people doing manual administration? Do we have people performing highly repetitive manual tasks that are low value? Do we have a turnover problem? Do we have a talent retention problem? Like, what are we trying to solve for? And then what does utopia look like? So if we can change that, what does it look like in the future? And if AI is the bind between the two of them, if we thoughtfully deploy use cases in any of those aforementioned areas, you can make an influence. Because what AI does exceptionally well is automate process and exchange information and then analyze and infer from information. So when we, for example, at Atlas, we built our company using AI from scratch. And I mentioned we've had to change our approach. What we're doing now is we're journey mapping the employee, the customer, the partner, the investor experience, but we're remapping it now for 3 different parallel tracks: the human experience, the digital experience, and the artificial intelligence experience. And our org design, as I mentioned, looks more like a planetary system than it does like a triangle or a pyramid, because everything interacts with everything else. And we have to build it in that modularity, because as you add different elements, they have to fit into the other ecosystem, and they have to be almost have interdependencies, but also have redundancies. So we don't lose something because something gets pulled out of the ecosystem. So we're almost building a bit of a rainforest, as it were, of how it interacts. So, but we started from the place of what problems are we trying to solve for? The reason I'm building the rainforest is I started with the problem of I need to really enhance my research process, because right now it's super manual for me to grab research. I need to save time and redeploy this resource to partnerships, to build more relationships with content sources, spend less time pulling the information and manually downloading PDFs, spending more time saying, hello, company X publisher, you have some incredible research that's outside of your paywall that we think is in the public domain that people would love to see. Do you want to work a partnership agreement? I want them doing that, not downloading PDFs and tagging them, putting them in my platform. But AI facilitated that. So we find the use case, we redeploy the resource, and the bias always is for remove the administration, increase the relationship. I start from that place, Charles, and then I build a system. So I build a program that says, every time we come across a process or a problem, how do we look at it through that lens? And then what's the sprint, agile-wise, of what we need to accomplish to turn this from a problem or an opportunity into a proficiency? And now, because we're doing that so many times, I can do them in 2-week sprints. And I can go, Matt, we're going to solve these 6 problems in the organization this week. Here's the strategy. Here's the AI. Here's the digital. Boop, 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 boop. And we're done. And now we can build out fast scale.
Sure. You know, I wanted to come back. You had mentioned a couple moments ago that in your previous incarnations, if you will, that you were often too far out in front of others in senior positions of leadership, particularly when it has to do with a business transformation project. And if you had to do it again, you do it differently. But the reason I wanted to come back to that is I wanted to ask you if AI changes things, because, you know, AI does land, I think, with disproportionate force on people at work. It is a people problem. It is a technology, but it is a people problem. And we think deeply enough, it becomes an existential problem. As we know, we don't want to take the conversation down that blind alley. We know that's not going to be terribly productive.
I think about that a lot.
Yes, but to the extent that it's you know, AI is about making us all better. It's giving us maybe customized pathways for learning. Maybe it's making us in some ways more collaborative. It's certainly making the organization more efficient. On the other side, of course, people are concerned that now we could legitimately do more with less. It's probably sending ripples of anxiety at every level of the workforce. So to the extent that AI does land on people at work in these ways, can it be argued that actually no, HR needs to be out in front? HR has long been clamoring for a seat at the proverbial table. Does AI actually move them in that direction more than anything else that's come down the pike in certainly recent memory?
I appreciate the thoughtfulness of your questions. Just want to say that. Thank you. The question I was asking when you were sharing kind of your reflections on the things that I said was, am I making the same mistake again? Like, am I too far ahead again? And here's the answer I created in my head while you were talking, which was, I like the way that I was operating. I was just in the wrong job. So now as a CEO, I have to be leading. So for me, it's actually the license that I need to operate that way I've always wanted to operate. In that CHRO job, I often felt conflicted because I felt that I was too far ahead, but I knew that I was trying to create an example that people would follow, and people just unfortunately didn't the way that I was hoping that they would, because I didn't spend the time to do that. As a CHRO, I learned that, and now as a CEO, I'm much more thoughtful about bringing people with me on that journey, and people expect it from me now. So in that sense, there's no conflict. To answer your question about whether HR should be at the front, the answer, in my opinion, is no. This needs to be a CEO-led initiative. This is the equivalent of going from the internet, electricity. This needs to be from the top level of the organization, and the change begins with the board and the CEO. If it's led by IT or finance or HR or marketing or operations, you're going to have that inherent bias in your entire strategy, which might work. But I think that it needs to be a holistic strategy, not a department-specific strategy. HR will look through the lens of AI, and rightfully so, as how do we get efficiencies? How do we get performance? How do we get engagement? How do we get wellness? That's the way I'd see it as a CHRO. Right. As a finance officer, I have different criteria. So I'm measured against different criteria. So I'm going to overlay my bias into that AI conversation. I'm looking for cost containment. I'm looking for efficiencies. I'm looking for risk mitigation. I'm looking for predictive indices that keep me out of harm's way in a bunch of different areas.
But you
so
see,
because of that.
Yeah, if I could just interject, Matt, what was kind of interesting is, like, if you have a CRM or an ERP, there are certain stakeholders naturally who are going to circle around those conversations and make those decisions. With AI, as you were talking here, it cuts across every functional area. So yeah, to say that any one ought to take the lead, particularly since each one has their own interests. But to the extent that it cuts across all of these functional areas, it's not so much a matter of taking the lead. It's a matter of working collaboratively where HR may have actually taken a backseat, now should be at the same level. And everybody needs to be all in order to make decisions. Because every decision with AI is going to affect everybody, it seems to me.
Yep.
So everybody needs to be at the outset involved in a decision-making role.
HR should be a leading voice. It should not be the leading voice. So this is my least favorite analogy involving the business world is a seat at the table. Like we are so past that conversation. So if you need AI to get yourself to the table, you're in the wrong company or you're in the wrong role because HR is a critical part of every business. People are your most important assets. I can't believe we're having this conversation in 2024. The science is clearly behind it. Organizations that are more profitable, more innovative, more resilient, treat their people well. And when we align people around those strategies, organizations perform well. It's not the only thing that they need, but with all other things being equal, that is just a differentiator around performance. Now, the idea of other departments stepping up, I love it. I love when someone says, hey, I want to take the mantle and I want to set a standard and set a tone. And also just someone has to go first to a certain point. And there's value in that. But I think the mistake I made was I should have got 3 months ahead and looked around. I got 2 years ahead and looked around. And by that time, I was disconnected from the realities of the business. And I didn't build the bridge between where I was and where the rest of the organization was. So I had a highly motivated, highly proficient HR team operating almost like an embedded consulting practice because they did and operated completely different than everybody else. And that created friction with things like I didn't require people to work from the office. I don't care where you work. It's output based. You can work from wherever you want. But I had colleagues who were like, I need you in your desk 5 days a week. And that created friction because my colleagues were off doing various things and calling in from various meetings in different places. And their colleagues were calling in from their cubicles.
Yeah.
And that was something I didn't anticipate. I'm like, I'm doing the right things. I'm getting high performers in who don't want to be tied to a desk. We're high performing. We're doing all these amazing things. Leave us alone. But again, I didn't spend the time to think about how would it affect the other people in the organization if I introduced innovative air quotes, innovative employment practices, right? Now it's commonplace, but at the time, saying people could be fully remote in a corporate environment was not common. Right. So, that's the piece I would do differently. I do believe IT needs to play a leading role. I believe finance needs to play a leading role, but I think where they need to play a leading role is around the strategy, because to your point, this can affect efficiency. This can affect cost certainty. This can affect risk. What weighting do you want to apply to each one of those adjectives? That's a really important conversation that you want the cross-functional team to have.
Yeah, I like this idea, sort of a metaphor of dialing in your AI.
Yeah.
Where it's sort of all these things are calibrated and in balance. Efficiency is in balance with being human-centric, and this is in balance with making sure you're mitigating bias and being
three-legged stool. It's got to have all three legs.
Yeah, sure. So now that we're coming into the home stretch, Matt, I really do appreciate your time and your thoughtfulness and everything. Really, it's been a real terrific conversation. So now I just want to bring it back. Some personal things, a little bit light, perhaps. If you could automate one aspect of your work, what would it be? And what do you think is the one aspect of your work that you don't feel can ever be automated?
I'm never going to automate a conversation between myself and a customer or an employee. And I'll be able to do that in about 3 months if I want to. I could create an avatar, map it to my voice, and train it so that it could answer very basic questions on my behalf, and I could have it show up in meetings for me, which I think is just out of integrity, but it's possible technologically speaking. So for example, that's a hard line for me is I believe so strongly in the human experience and in relationships, which is why I'm pushing so hard on technology. Technology is necessary to give us the time back to reinvest in those relationships. So that for me is just a non-starter. I won't go down that path. What would I automate in my life that I haven't automated yet? I'm automating a lot of things right now. So I think the area that I'm most eager to automate is the space between a conversation and an action. So we have good meetings, we have good discussions, we take good notes, we take action items down, but sometimes that doesn't always translate through into an action that gets completed. And that's for a whole bunch of reasons that happen in every corporate culture. Somebody mentioned something at the end of a meeting. Somebody took a note down wrong. It didn't happen. Like all these different kind of like just small little process breakdowns. To me, those are missed opportunities for us to introduce context, to involve somebody else in a conversation. And I'm trying to get better about automating the flow of communication so that the people that need to see the information see it when they need to see it and they can access it. And that includes using our own AI technology.
Matt, this is a real good conversation because while our conversations are AI centric, it's all about the intersection of AI and just us being humans and making our way in this brave new world. There's a lot of excitement. There are a lot of possibilities. There's certainly a lot of unknowns, some fear. So I really appreciated having you on to talk about your rich and varied human experience in your various roles, of course, now culminating with your position with Atlas Copilot. So Matt, this has been a fascinating conversation. Thanks so much.
One quick thing. You mentioned earlier not wanting to go down the path of ethics, and I understand why. That's in this conversation. We'll save it for another day. But here's what I would say. For those who are concerned about AI and where it's going, that's a valid concern. AI is going to supercharge whatever intention you put behind it. So if you have good intentions, you're going to see amazing things. If you have bad intentions, it'll be a bad thing. It's like social media, like the internet. It's a machine you're building. The inputs derive the outputs. Our organization is founded by 2 CHROs and 2 people who've been working with HR for 20 years. We feel a deep sense of responsibility to making sure we do this the right way from the very beginning. And that means looking at the mental health implications, the diversity, inclusion, and equity and belonging implications. It means the implications to job loss and to broader society. It means we know the potential of what we can do on the good, but we also are aware of where we could potentially cause harm. And I really don't want to repeat the mistakes of social media with AI. So we're being thoughtful about that. No one's asking us to, but it's really important to us that when that happens, because I want to look back at this legacy and know that we did something good, that it wasn't just canceled out by something bad. Mm-hmm. So we have the ability now to architect that. The beautiful thing about AI is none of us write any code. It doesn't matter. We can use the methods available to us and work with talented engineers to build our visions in a way we couldn't before. This is a solution that was built by HR for HR people. So it's an important distinction. I would encourage anybody who has any questions about the ethics of what we're doing or how we're doing it or how we look at the world, send me a LinkedIn message. I'm happy to have this conversation. I think it's a good exercise. And I think it's important that the broader public holds us accountable to this because it's in their best interest to do that.
Yeah. Well, I think we're going to have you on at least another time, maybe a couple of other times, because it sounds like we have a lot to talk about. But Matt, again, thanks so much for taking the time with us today.
Thank you.
Today's guest was Matt Burns, CEO and co-founder of Atlas Copilot. He is also the host and producer of the Thinking Inside the Box podcast. Matt joined us today from Montreal. This is Charles Epstein for the X Factor podcast. Thanks for listening.